to Pan Society Radio, your home for modern animism. I'm your host, Laura Giles. We did a show with Brana Mijatovic about crystals and crystal healing. She got a lot of follow-up questions, as did we, so we're doing a second one to get to all those questions. If you missed that show, be sure to check it out in our archives. For now, let's open by calling in the elements. I call to the energy of Earth and ask that you bring in stability so that we may move forward from a place of groundedness. I call in the element of air and ask that we borrow your inspiration to make this podcast entertaining and useful. Please bring us clarity so that we speak clearly and are received with understanding. I call in the element of fire and ask that you ignite our passion so that we may hear the voice of truth within us and do something with it. I call in the element of water to give us flexibility in thinking and feeling. I also ask that our loving, helping ancestors be with us today to help guide us in the direction that we most need to go to open our hearts and reach out in a way that benefits us all. I'd also like to begin by expressing gratitude to the elements, our helping ancestors, and all our non-human relations for helping us in ways that are both seen and unseen. I'd like to thank you, our listeners, for tuning in and supporting us with your donations. We are a listener-sponsored station and rely on your support to exist, so please keep that coming in. If you haven't donated yet and you want to, you can do that on our website at www.pansociety.net. I'd also like to thank our guest today, Brana Mijatovic, a professional crystal reader who also does crystal Reiki and crystal healing. Welcome, Brana.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Thanks again for spending time with us. I have a ton of questions, so let's just get started.
Okay, great.
Do some crystals work well for a particular problem for one person but not another?
That is a wonderful question. And one of the reasons why a lot of people give up on crystals or believe that crystals are just quote-unquote not working for them. It is very important to understand that crystals work with our personal energy. They're not some magical devices that you just press the button and then it's going to radiate this energy that has been encoded within and you will get what everybody else gets. It's not how it works. So this is why when you hear from someone, oh, I got this crystal, let's say amethyst. A lot of people recommend amethyst for sleeping. And then somebody gets an amethyst, is all excited, oh, I'm going to get such a great night's sleep, and then they're awake all night, because for them, amethyst is actually clearing their third eye chakra and kind of bringing up all kinds of thoughts for processing. So they couldn't sleep at all, whereas somebody else is going to tell them, oh, it's fantastic, I slept, like a baby holding it. What is interesting is when you go to forums and look how people talk about it, a lot of people who do not have experience with with working with people are really vehemently arguing for their choice, and it's really interesting to see how closely tied people are to their experience with crystals and feel that that's the only experience that everybody else is going to get.
Okay.
But at the same time, the good thing about these forums is that you do get to see that people do not have the same experience. I have learned that by myself when I first started studying about 15 years ago now. Started going to the very few forums that existed in the world at that time, and that's how I first realized that. And then later, when I started working for the company called Healing Crystals, when I started answering questions, then it got even more obvious.
Okay. Well, I got a lot of questions from your last talk about crystals.
Okay.
So there's a bunch of people who want recommendations. So can you tell me, are there any crystals that you recommend for sleep?
Yes. What my recommendations for better sleep are typically not what you would find online. And my recommendation is that if you want to get a good night's sleep, to work with crystals during the day and then just before going to bed, but not to sleep with crystals. So that will be my general recommendation for something that works for the majority of people. Again, if there is somebody who has a particular stone that they have found that works for for them for sleep, wonderful. But the reason that I just mentioned earlier why I would not recommend it is that you will have to go through a lot of personal experimentation before you actually find something that is going to keep you asleep as opposed to keep you awake. So, and the reason I say it's good to work with them during the day. So what is going to help you sleep better at night is if you can remain grounded and recharging your energy during the day, then your body is going to be more able to relax when it's time to sleep. So what I would recommend for that are any kind of grounding crystals. And especially today, in this time, in the last 2 years, we've had an enormous amount of cosmic radiation from the Earth and influencing everyone's nervous system, whether they recognize it or not, whether they're more sensitive to it or not, so that most people need today is grounding. So if you're going to do just one thing after this podcast, find yourself a few good grounding crystals, meaning good for you, but I can give you a list to experiment with. I would recommend black tourmaline, black jasper, black agate. A lot of people want to use black obsidian for grounding. Black obsidian is more appropriate for some other things, such as for clearing a lot of issues, not so much for grounding, just because of how it was formed, came out of a volcano in a very dramatic process, so it is not really grounding stone by itself. But a lot of brown stones, brown colors, so that would be brown tourmaline, that would be brown jasper, and then some red stones as well. So for instance, red jasper or ruby. So I'm just giving you the most typical ones that no matter where you live, if you have a crystal store, you'll be able to find them in the crystal store.
Okay. So how about jet lag? I'm sorry, go ahead.
And then, there are some specific processes that you can actually do before going to sleep. So I will just give you one that can be very, very helpful, and that is to, when you are, about half an hour before going to bed, when you start turning off all your electronic devices and maybe you've already taken a bath or whatever you usually do in the evening, to lie down on your back with a few stones of smoky quartz. So you can hold one in each hand and then place one on the body and place one between your knees or between your feet or below your feet. You can again experiment with what feels best for you. And just lie down like that for about 5, 10, 15 minutes, and you might notice how your body starts slowly to relax and release any stresses that you may have accumulated throughout the day. And that really brings you in a beautiful state to be able to fall asleep and also stay asleep.
Okay. How about jet lag? Any recommendations for?
Yes. I travel a lot. In the last 20 years, I've traveled, at least internationally, at least 4 times a year over Atlantic. I learned a lot about jet lag. The best things to do again are to prepare ahead of time, meaning to wear certain stones while you're flying, so that when you get there, you're already in a different physical and energetic state. Because once your body has experienced so much fatigue because of the long flight and everything that happens during the flight, it is again a little too late to start to think, okay, how am I gonna now transition into this new time zone or recover from it. But if you're able to wear crystals during the flight, then your body is already in a much better shape to adjust to the new environment. So, in contrast to my typical advice to wear fewer crystals in general, for flying long distances, I recommend wearing a lot of stones. And so I usually recommend wearing a lot of energizing stones. My favorites are always carnelian and citrine, and then black tourmaline for grounding. Fluorite, definitely, always, just simply because it's great for the immune system, and we know what those flames are like. And then anything else that you feel that you might want to add. So again, it takes a lot of experimentation because even for me, a lot of times they put a lot of things on and then I feel it's too much and then I take it off and just put it in my purse. Or, during the flight I realize I need something more and then I just, take it and put it on. But again, for this to be effective, you would have had to have experimented beforehand.
Mm-hmm.
You have to know what, certain stones are doing for you in the general, your general day, so that you can actually then use that energy during the flight. I would not recommend, traveling and then the day before buying all of the stones that are recommended because of everything that can set fire to this. So, also one important thing to add, and this is what I discovered through personal experimentation as well. If you see it anywhere written, it came from me. Because I have to claim that because I haven't seen it anywhere and I read a lot and I experimented with it a lot. So, stones are called mucky marbles. They have many other names, but it's easiest to find them under mucky marbles, which are iron-based stones, are fantastic to have if you have problems with those changes in the ears, when the plane takes off and when it starts to land. So if you have problems with that, bring those stones with you and hold them in your hand as the plane takes off. You would not believe what the difference it would make.
Okay.
So those people who heard that, I used to, again, I traveled a lot and I tried a lot of different things, from chewing a bubble gum to doing all kinds of other stuff. Nothing helped until I actually did that. And then, I was doing that for a few years. And then I said, okay, well, how about I talk to it from this flight? Let me tell you, I regretted that. I just wanted to see, what was happening. But, no, I went back to them because it was very obvious. It was made, that helped.
So you talked about wearing crystal jewelry. Is there a difference between wearing it and having it in your hand?
Well, no, not between wearing it and having it in your hand, but between wearing it and meditating with it or with them, there is a huge difference. Okay. So, one of my teachers and a person that I strongly recommend for any kind of in-depth learning is Naisha Asian. And she is the one who, for the very first time, has actually introduced the concept of deep meditation and deep work with crystals that now has become more and more common. But she is the one who really set the tone and the basis for that kind of learning. And so whoever has a chance and has the financial ability to take her course, Becoming the Human Crystal, I strongly recommend that. It is expensive, but if you really feel committed to your personal growth and learning, I would strongly recommend that. And even though I myself am offering courses, I give really, really high respect to my teachers, and this is why I say that. Because I have seen a lot of people who copy her stuff, and I really want to make sure that her work is honored. It's just a very important thing for me. So meditating with crystals is one of the best ways to develop a really strong connection with yourself. And meditation with crystals can be done in many, many different ways. Obviously, just like I think there are about 36 different ways to meditate. So that's going to be about 36 different ways to meditate with crystals. And so you have to discover again for yourself what works best. But even if you just spend 5 minutes with your eyes closed, holding a stone, doing absolutely nothing, just seeing what you're going to get, is better than just picking the stone up, putting it in your pocket, and going about your day. And the reason for that is because you learn so much, much more than if you're just carrying it throughout the day when you maybe even forget it with you and then forget to keep track of what's going on. So for instance, before I knew about Naisha Asian and before I ever even took her course, this is what I have done. I have actually I would choose a stone based on the properties that are described in a book. This is how it started. And then I would wear it, and then I would notice what kind of an effect it has. And then I would do that every day for a number of different stones. I wouldn't change stones every day because it's good to have a longer period of time to observe significant after some time, I think I mentioned in the last podcast, I would not even read anything. I would just connect with the stone on my own and then write my impressions and then check in the book, or any books that I had to see, how much it matches.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes, totally. So are there some that work well together, like maybe magnify the effect, or maybe...
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Those that work together, again, you want to think about the effect that you want. So what is the effect that you want? If you want, for instance, to increase your intuitive abilities, you may want to pair up the crystals that, number one, you may want to pair up a crystal for the third eye stone with a crystal for the ground for grounding, because you do want to be grounded when you're working with your third eye chakra. On the other hand, some people who already are grounded, who know how to do grounding without stones, may want to pair up a number of different stones that they have previously worked with separately for the intuitive development. So, for instance, some people like to combine a lot of different stones. Richard Simmons has this very famous number of stones. He calls them the synergy stones, synergy 12, which may be too much for some people to work with 12 stones just for the intuitive development. It can be too much for the third eye chakra. But you can certainly combine stones that you have already, as you said, found that work for you. So some of the sage stones to work with, not to blow anything up or blow anything too open, would be, for instance, labradorite, and then you can pair up any stone with clear quartz to enhance its potency. But you can pair up labradorite with tanzanite, for instance. You can pair up Herkimer Diamond with petalite and phenocite, for instance. You can add to them solacite, SCO, solacite, for kind of inner calm, because these are very activating for the mind, and then solacite would mean inner calm. The only thing that I would recommend to be super cautious with, is probably most people know by now, is moldavite. Because moldavite on its own, for some people, can be very, very dramatic in its effect, whereas for somebody else, it can be very soothing. But again, it's good to know if somebody recommends moldavite to you, this is the one that goes beyond just, I'm not feeling anything. It can really, really charge you up, or, have you have some unexpected experiences.
Yeah.
So, do you have any personal experiences?
Yeah.
I could tell by your voice.
I was a guinea pig in a crystal healing demo, and the person used moldavite, an abundance of moldavite, and it was not pleasant. Yeah.
So, but this is exactly what, it's great when somebody wants to show what crystals can do, but I really, really stay away from exhibitions like that, because it can affect the person,
Yeah.
Yeah, you're going to get the effect from the audience, but
yes.
not so much.
Yeah, there were people in the audience that were impacted by that too.
You're still alive, you're still okay.
Yeah. So you mentioned wearing 12 crystals at a time, and that does sound like a lot. So how many, kind of generally speaking, is too many?
Well, there is a difference with someone who is just starting out as opposed to someone who has worked with crystals for a number of years. So that is the first thing that everyone should keep in mind. And then the second thing is, again, we all have different abilities in terms of handling energy. So, but let me give you a very specific example. When I worked for the company Healing Crystals, I was one of the writers of their content, and you can still find a lot of my articles on their website. And also I answered a lot of questions. We, at that time, when I was working for them, we were one of the few places in the world where you could get answers from a live person, to your questions. And then I also increased their following on the Facebook, where I started to get live Q&As every Friday, and then so forth. What is the most typical thing for people who are just starting to work with crystals? Most typically, we would get people who are very, very sick, have multiple issues, and want to get a crystal for every single issue to fix their problem. So we have to be very, very specific and very careful in how to answer, so as not to give, number one, give anyone false hope. And I have actually asked for the disclaimer to be made and to be included in every email, in every correspondence. Just put on the page very visibly that crystals work with energy and can help on an energetic level, but they should never be a replacement for any kind of medical treatment or medical opinion. So first of all, hopefully by now this is clear. I mean, by now, historically speaking, because there's so much more information about crystals now. So first of all that. Second of all, the important thing is, for somebody who has a lot of issues, you should just start working with one stone, however counterintuitive it may look, because crystals affect our energy. And if they start affecting your energy, you have 12 crystals for 12 different things that you wanted to fix right away. Guess what's going to happen? It's going to create a turmoil in your body, because they're all affecting things that already are not functioning well. So if there is one thing that I really would like people to understand, those who are really new to crystals, that first of all, they're never a replacement. Second of all, they can help a lot, but at the same time, starting slowly is much better than trying to fix everything right away. Okay.
So what do you think of the chakra pendant? So the one that has a crystal for each chakra, it's like a necklace kind of thing.
Yeah.
Are those too much?
Well, a lot of people are drawn to them, and this again, if somebody is drawn to a stone, this is a sign that it has a potential to work well for them. But some people get it just because it is called a chakra pendant, and because it just feels like they just think that it's going to be a good thing to have, and then they discover it's too much. So everybody is again going to discover for themselves. If you're getting it just because somebody recommended it, or just because you read about it, you may want to see how you feel when you actually pick it up, when you actually hold it in your hand, because it can be too much for some people, even the small stones in a pendant. So, it's just good to know, so that you don't have these expectations and then are disappointed and then are just throwing everything out just because something didn't work for you when you were not aware that it's not how it's supposed to work.
So do you recommend working with crystals and chakras then? So just maybe one at a time?
Actually, I'm currently doing a workshop on chakras.
Oh.
And I've just,
how timely.
And I just finished one this fall, and we have gone through sort of the 7 or 8 classes, where the first one is introduction to the chakra system, and then each subsequent class is devoted to one chakra. So certainly it can be helpful to work with specific stones for specific chakras. And again, how are you going to choose the stones? If you're choosing by yourself, if you're not taking the class, then I would recommend really, again, reading as much as you can about how many different crystals are recommended for this one particular chakra that you want to, help, that you want to help transform, and then choosing the 1 or 2 or 3 maximum that you're really, really drawn to. So the key thing is that you're drawn to.
Okay. So I have this list of questions, and it's going to sound out of order because I'm jumping off of everything you're saying, and then it just gets scattered. But I want to go back to the crystals for certain purposes. Are there crystals that you can recommend for anxiety or to promote calm?
Yes. Again, going back to my experience with healing crystals because it's relevant. Show that when I say something, it comes from a huge amount of experience and communication with people that I have been honored to actually participate, in so many conversations. When I put everything together, in terms of how many days there were, how many questions per day I answered, what were, some of the typical questions, it came out that I answered about 5,000 questions.
Oh, wow.
During my time there, which means that I also got to hear that many questions.
Yeah.
And so many of them were repetitive, and so many people wrote back. So it's not just somebody asked me a question, I said, this is this, and then that was the end. A lot of times those people would come back, they would say what the experience was, and this is also another confirmation, for me to hear, okay, this is not just my intuition, this is not just what, I'm saying, it actually did help them. So, lithium quartz is one of the top 3 stones that most people have found super helpful for calmness, relaxation, releasing anxiety and stress. Even some people with PTSD have found help with that, and even some people who had bipolar had found relief with lithium quartz. Lithium quartz. Again, keeping in mind it's not a replacement for any medication. So that would be one. The other one I would recommend that a little bit more rare stone called solicite, SOLICET. But the most important thing is the first part, because it's an unusual way to pronounce the name of that stone. So CS, solicite.
Okay.
That is a super calming stone, which is a white crystal for anybody who starts looking on Google. And it is very calming for the mind. And so it is very worthwhile trying to find it and experiment with it. Another relatively rare stone that is very calming is stilbite. So I'm giving a little more, so usually I recommend some typical stones that you can find, and then some a little, more rare stones, just so people can have some range. And then, of course, for something super typical, a combination of amethyst and rose quartz is what for most people in the world works really well for calm.
Okay. And are there crystals that don't work well together or maybe shouldn't be stored together?
That is a great question. And in terms of are they not working well together, again, just keeping in mind what your purpose is, and what crystals are, right? So if you want to be calm, then you don't want to use the crystal that's going to be energizing, right? It's going to introduce a lot of movement in the body. So for instance, just being very general, you don't want to use orange calcite or red calcite if you at the same time want to reduce anxiety and go to that state of calmness with, solicite and lithium quartz and so forth.
Right.
Now again, keeping in mind, I know that somebody's going to say, but for me, calcite is super calming and I love it and everything. I'm talking in general, just based on the general property of the stone, what is it for? It's a firestone, it moves energy in the body, so this is why. It's not like a random, calcite is for that, but just because of its actual physical, chemical properties that I say that. And in terms of the storing, you really just need to think of whether you have soft crystals next to the hard crystals, so that you don't scratch the stone, the soft and hard. But other than that, you can store them in any way that you feel is appropriate.
Okay. So can people become overly reliant on crystals, like addiction?
Yeah. Absolutely. And that is actually very common at some point. During the process of learning about crystals, it's just a very, very common experience. But then, after a while, it kind of subsides. So it's almost like this, going from not knowing anything to being excited about the first 3, 4, 5 stones that you get, to getting like 20 stones, 30 stones, and then, much, still trying to hide it from your husband, die and then have to die. And then slowly, weaning yourself off, starting to really be a little more discriminate. So yeah, I mean, because for people who have never had any experience with crystals, this may sound a little strange, but they can make you feel so good that it is really an experience that you want to hold on to. Now, another person that I have learned a lot from online, following her online, again, that was more than 16, 17 years ago, and I don't know if her materials are still up. Karen, and I forgot the last name, I'm really sorry, but she was from Canada, and she was talking, she had a very specific process again that I have never seen anywhere else, and so if I can find her name, I will send it to you and you can put it in the notation for the podcast.
Okay.
But she recommended some very specific ways of working with crystals, such as if you want to just initiate a change, then just for 7 days. If you want to create change in your mind, then for 21 days. And if you want to create a little more permanent change, then between the 3 months and 6 months of working with crystals. And then something similar is recommended by Michael Geiger, who was, let me just see, I want to pronounce his name right. He was the phenomenal researcher from Germany that wrote a lot of books that a lot of people are referencing today and learning from today. His last name is spelled Geinger. So, and I'm pronouncing Michael because of the German pronunciation. So he also has this idea that with crystals, for a little more permanent change, a longer work with one particular stone or type of stone is beneficial. And then, when you achieve that result, then you don't need a stone anymore. Right? Because you don't want to become dependent on a stone, you just want to use it as a helper to get you to a certain stage.
Okay. So, lots of married women wear diamond. So what could that do over time?
Well, I gotta say that there are a couple of things in regards to diamonds, and one of the biggest problems for diamonds is the the energy associated with them and how they're mined. One of the things that people may or may not realize is that because crystals amplify energy, and a lot of them, I don't want to say absorb, but just for the purposes of ease of explanation, let's go with absorb. So a lot of people absorb energy. They absorb the energy of the pain and of the trouble, let's say, and the state of mind of people who dig the crystal.
Mm-hmm.
Because in the same way that they're helping you change your vibration, they are also absorbing, on the other hand, the traumatic experiences that people who do work in those mines, and probably everybody by now in the world has heard of blood diamonds and what that means.
Mm-hmm.
So they are affected by that much energy that is the painful energy and troublesome energy in the world. I mean, connected to the diamond. So that, that is one of the biggest problems today. And I know a lot of women who decide actually not to get diamonds and instead to get a different stone simply because of how they are mined. Diamond is not the easiest stone to work with energetically because, and especially not to wear for a prolonged period of time. So again, yet another reason why maybe a different kind of stone would be more appropriate.
Mm-hmm. So what's the difference between a Herkimer diamond and the type that typically go in wedding rings?
Oh, okay. Well, Herkimer Diamond is actually not a diamond in terms of the chemical composition.
Yeah.
It's a type of quartz. So it is called Herkimer because it is found in Herkimer, New York. And actually, since it was discovered, since it was given a name, it was found in many other places in the world. I actually have some because it is called a diamond because it has a very specific formation and it has a very, very specific clarity. But I have come across stones like that from Mexico, from Pakistan, from many other parts in the world. So it's not as unique as people first believed 10 years ago. But it is a fantastic stone that is wonderful for if you want to have a greater connection with your purpose, if you want to go on shamanic journeys. Of course, it is much better to be trained in shamanic journey and then use the Herkimer Diamond to help with that than just say, okay, I'm going to just take this stone and now I'm going to go on a shamanic journey. It doesn't really work like that. But I can tell you that if you decide to sleep with Herkimer Diamond, you will have some really, really interesting dreams. Of course, not a peaceful sleep, but very unusual dreams. So if you're into investigating dreams and want to do some kind of dream work that you are already familiar with, that's what Herkimer Diamond can help with.
Okay.
Overall, it's a wonderful experience for activating the crown and the third eye chakra. But again, much better to do it consciously and with a purpose than just to wear it, on an everyday basis. I mean, you can, but if you really want to closely and fully explore its potential, it's better to do it with a purpose.
Okay. So if I'm looking for an alternative to diamond as a wedding ring, what about birthstones? So is my birthstone, does it really have anything to do with my birthday, and is it special to me in any way or anybody?
Yeah, that is another great question. And the best thing would be to actually hire a professional astrologer who does, based on your personal chart, who can find what the best crystals for you are. Yeah, much better than going with just the general. I mean, as you can imagine, just like reading daily astrology posts for a Gemini, if you're a Gemini, that you have so many other things going on in your chart that, it may not fit you at all. So the same thing for the stone, that is just a general based on just a sign and based on, for everyone. So, if you really want a specific stone, then investing in an astrologer who is going to get you to that, point of choosing the right stone for you actually is a worthwhile investment.
Okay. How about how do crystals that are still within the land impact the land, or do they?
Yeah, absolutely. And we have an example with crystals from Tibet. They're known as Tibetan quartz. And even the textiles that are found in Tibetan textiles have a different kind of energy from any other textile that is found anywhere else. Yeah. So it is interesting that when you start collecting crystals and when you start having a connection or establishing a connection with crystals from all over the world that I have, you realize that the quartz is not just a quartz. There is quartz from Brazil that has a certain kind of energy. There is quartz from one area of Brazil that has a certain kind of energy, and then another area that has a different kind of energy. There is a quartz from Arkansas that has a particular kind of energy, and then there is a quartz from Madagascar that has a totally different kind of energy. So just by connecting with stones of the same type from different parts of the world, you can see for yourself that that's the case. Now, specifically to go back to the Tibetan quartz is affected by the energy of the thousands of years of meditation that Tibetan monks have been doing on those mountains for thousands of years. Just like, as I mentioned, the diamonds are affected by the consciousness of pain, the quartz from Tibet is affected by the consciousness of peace that is being constantly projected and increased in relationship to people who are so, how can I put it, so, the meditation creates a certain kind of field, an energetic field, and that field then is supported by the crystals that are within the earth, but also that field affects the crystals that are within the earth, and that creates synergistic partnership, so to speak, so that this energy just continues to grow stronger and stronger. compare that with places that maybe used to be places for meditation that are no longer, right? So if you can think of any place in the world that you know used to be a place for meditation and now it's not, or used to be a church and then it's abandoned, or used to be a pyramid and then it's abandoned, it is very likely that you do not have that kind of support from the earth to sustain that kind of energy and just keep it going continually, like in a
interesting.
circle.
Okay. So what about just the quartz that is in my backyard underneath my house? Is there any relationship to the land with those?
Yeah, there's always a relationship to the land. Well, first of all, we want to think of how something is formed, right? So there is a type of crystal that takes a super long time for millions of years, and then there is another type of crystal that doesn't take that such a long time. So just the fact of how long something takes to be formed, how long something is deep within the earth before it comes to the surface, all of that matters in terms of how we feel the energy. So if you have quartz in your backyard, that's wonderful. It certainly is going to, it certainly is going to help you in some way. But you want to think of what kinds of events have been going on there. So, for instance, if there have been battles in places where there is a lot of quartz, then I wouldn't really buy quartz from that area.
Okay. So you were talking about how it was made. What about like heat-treated, man-made crystals? Are they the same as raw, natural ones?
They're not the same, but there has to be, or it's good to make a difference between heat-treated and the man-made.
Okay.
Heat-treated means the heat is applied to a stone to change its color or to enhance its color. The most typical heat-treated stone is citrine, or what is known as citrine, but today people call it baked amethyst, because it was made from heating the amethyst. And then there is a difference between that stone, which already is a crystal, but has been transformed through the use of radiation to change color, and the stone that, for instance, goldstone, which contains small parts of copper within it, but has never in itself been an actual crystal that is made by putting different things together in a lab. And again, some people love goldstone, and there is nothing wrong with that, but we do need to realize that, yes, maybe you like it because it has that copper, and you're really strongly resonate with copper energy, but it's not the same thing as actually having a stone that has been in the ground for millions of years.
So what's the difference between a rock and a crystal?
Rock has a combination of different things within it, and this combination of these different things, meaning it can be a mineral, it can be several minerals, has no particular crystalline structure. And in great part, it is the crystalline structure that helps us connect with stones, because the specific structure has a specific vibration. And this vibration can now even be recorded, and not recorded but measured. So when something has a very specific structure, it resonates at a very specific frequency, and it is very stable. So that kind of oscillation, stable oscillation, is what helps us connect with the stone and reap the benefits of the stone. Rock does not have that. When something is a rock, it means it does not have a crystalline structure, and it is very likely a combination of different minerals, but to a such degree that is not even precise combinations. We can say, okay, it's a combination of chrysocolla and malachite. The combination of chrysocolla and malachite is not a rock. It's already, we know what it is. It's called chrysocolla and malachite, and it's a combination of two minerals.
Okay, so what if my crystal breaks? Is it still useful? Can it be fixed?
Yes. And so this is another question we got a lot when I worked with the healing crystals, because as you can imagine, it happens to a lot of people. So when a crystal breaks, it can break for a couple of different reasons, minimum, but I'll go with the two most typical ones. So sometimes it is simply a neglect, it falls out of your purse and it breaks. So when that happens, you can certainly still use it. It is not lose its properties, it did not lose anything, because the smallest amount of the crystal still contains the same crystalline structure and the same chemical composition, so that this vibration is not really changed.
Okay.
However, some people feel that when a crystal breaks, something is irreparably gone from the energy, and that belief has them not want to work with that stone. And that belief is so powerful that no matter what I say right now, people who have had that happen are probably not going to want to continue working with it.
Okay.
So it really depends on your personal belief, and how strongly you believe that crystal loses its power when it's broken. And then there is the third reason, which is sometimes the crystal does accumulate a lot of energy, and then it breaks, kind of show you it's done. So in that case, it will be good not to work with it anymore. Those are those instances where those people who have never worked with crystals would say, well, that's impossible. But those of us for whom this has happened, we have seen it in Transparise, and you know that something has happened there that is a little bit out of the ordinary, and then in that case, it's better to just put it in the ground and then, just have it connect with the earth and get yourself a different crystal.
Okay, so what was the purpose of putting it in the ground?
Well, just so you don't throw it in the trash, kind of being respectful, putting it back into the ground so it can decompose or disintegrate or whatever it needs to do, but the ground or the earth is going to absorb energy in a safe way. Versus
passing it on to someone else.
Oh, definitely. Don't pass it on.
Okay. Okay. What do you think of crystals used as yoni eggs? So I've seen them as jade, rose quartz, and obsidian, I think.
Right. Yeah, obsidian is very typical in Mexico. It's a very, very well developed practice. There are even courses that would take for that. Well, I have not tried it, and so I don't like to talk about things that I have not tried, so I would rather not talk about that. I know that some people find it useful. I know some other people are skeptical, so I would leave it to anyone who is interested in just research and form their own opinion.
Do you have an opinion about the safety?
I don't know what to say. I would really just not comment.
Okay, fair enough. Okay. We are almost out of time, but I'd like to ask you one more question.
Sure.
So obviously we're talking about crystals for healing, but are there any crystals that can destabilize you, like maybe something you should stay away from?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Well, again, one part of that question has to do with something we already talked about, which is personal energy. So any crystal, just keep that in mind, any crystal can destabilize you.
Okay.
But is that good or bad is the question. So what does it mean when a crystal destabilizes you? It can mean that there is something within you that you have been repressing, that the crystal is bringing out to the surface, and you're becoming uncomfortable with that, and therefore you feel unstable. Let's put it like that. So it is up to you whether you're going to recognize that, whether you have enough, enough knowledge to recognize that and then deal with that, or if you're going to feel that you never ever want to even touch that stone because it has caused that kind of a reaction within you. And either one is totally fine. And this is why it's also very good for those people who are not sure to work with a crystal therapist, because that can help you clear whatever comes up when something comes up. So that's one part of the question. Then the other part of the question is, there are certainly some stones that are really just not compatible with the energy of certain people. And if you have been working on yourself a lot and keep coming across a stone that you have cleared certain issues, and yet that stone is just doing something and you feel unpleasant, you can certainly stay away from that. And that just means that there is something energetically that you just do not, you're just, how can I put it, that is just not for you. You know what I mean? So just like certain, again, we can compare it to food. There are certain foods that no matter how great they are for other people, they're not going to be good for you.
Mm-hmm.
No matter what anybody says, these foods are simply not good for you.
Mm-hmm.
Because your system is different and you're always going to, let's say, have issues if you try to eat that. And so then you just stay away from that. It's not a matter of fixing anything within you or changing. It's just simply that with your energy, this does not work.
Okay, so it's just an individual thing. There's not one like humans should stay away from this.
Well, there are crystals that are actually poisonous.
Oh.
So, people should learn more because now with the predominance of all that, all the talk about the benefits of crystals, a lot of people, who read just randomly here and there can believe that any crystal is okay to touch, any crystal is okay to put in water. So, I mean, absolutely not. Just do your research. There are, as I said last time, more than 400 crystals today that are described as, for their healing properties, and many more that are not used for healing properties.
Mm-hmm.
So you really have to know what you're dealing with when you're working with a stone. Just like, again, compared to the plants, if you go to nature and just believe, oh, plants are wonderful, and you're just picking something up that is a poisonous plant,
right.
Yes, it's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So the same kind of discernment you want to develop in relation to crystals.
Mm-hmm. So that's a perfect segue to talk about how people can learn about your classes or get a healing from you. So how can they get in touch with you?
They can most easily contact me through either my Facebook page, Brana Crystal Cosmopolitan, or my website, crystalcosmopolitan.com.
Okay, fabulous. And for those of you that don't, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I just said awesome.
Oh, okay. So for those of you that don't know, Brana has done another podcast for us on crystals, and that one's kind of more basic, and you can access that in our archives. Brana, thank you so much for your time.
It was a pleasure. Thank you, Laura.
Mm-hmm. And thanks to all our listeners for tuning in, liking our Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter posts. We are here for you, so your interaction helps us to know what to do more of, and your donations help us to keep going. So if you want to donate, you can do that on our website at pansociety.net. If you have questions or comments, you can email me at laura@pansociety.net, or just check out the website and you'll see the contact button there. See you all next week.